Jenkins from Denton, Texas, home of the Von Erichs. All this discussion of the Attitude Era, the Monday Night Wars, and the lean times the wrestling business is stumbling through right now made me wonder, where is Ted Turner these days? I actually researched and found out that he's herding bison on huge ranches wherever he's been in between philanthropic endeavors. He's 75 years old and I guess retired from the corporate world, but he's got $2.2 billion, according to Forbes. Now, I haven't seen any Ted Turner shoot interviews, and all the business documentaries and profiles featuring him, there's little mention of WCW, if any. So maybe he's done with wrestling, but he can buy TNA outright if he wanted to, and with enough change, buy ROH. Is there a snowball's chance in hell he would buy? He purchased one dwindling promotion before. Would a Ted Turner return to the business world, or the wrestling world, bring the industry back to boom times? No. No, that's just oversimplifying it. I mean, look, Ted Turner, first of all, you mentioned $2.2 billion. I'm pretty sure Ted Turner has sworn to, I think, donate, if not all of that, like $1 billion of it, to charity, and I think is already doing so, because he's big into the philanthropy stuff, you know, like Bill Gates is, and Warren Buffett and all those people. So there is that. He has not been involved in wrestling for a long time, even when WCW was still alive. Some people don't realize that. It's not like WCW went out of business and so Ted Turner was out of wrestling. Ted Turner was out of wrestling long before WCW went out of business. And a lot of that had to do, I think, with the AOL Time Warner merger. And that was when Turner started to see a lot of his power contract. And eventually he was pushed out. You know, he used to be this big wig, this big media mogul. And especially, you know, when the merger happened, he got squeezed out. That's basically what happened. Squeezed out of CNN and all of those things. And marginalized to the point where he didn't really have any power anymore. I mean, he would still do interviews and people, you know, some people took his viewpoints as, you know, meaningful in some way. Here's a guy who used to be, you know, on top of the world and let's see what he has to say about this, that, or the other. But he didn't really have any power. Ted Turner was kind of ignored at that point and wasn't really taken seriously anymore. Now, if he wanted to get back into wrestling, he could do whatever he wants because he's got the money and he's got the resources. I mean, look at all these companies that are sprouting up now. If Ted Turner picked up the phone and called Jeff Jarrett and said, "Hey, Jeff, you know, I want to get back in the wrestling business," and I'm sure Jeff Jarrett would gladly take Ted Turner's money. But that's not going to happen. Ted Turner had a soft spot in his heart for wrestling because the wrestling programming on the Superstation in the early 80s is what really lifted that channel to prominence. And without the wrestling, who knows if that channel would have succeeded. So that's why he kept his involvement in wrestling and kept it going, because he had a soft spot for it. And, you know, I don't know that really matters to him anymore. I think he probably feels once WCW went away, that was the last link. You know, he's not even affiliated with the Superstation anymore, you know. It's like a previous life. He's living a completely different life now, almost like a life of obscurity. He's not really involved in that world anymore. And like you said, he's 75 years old. He's retired. He's in his twilight years. Why would he want to get back into wrestling? Why would he care? If he wanted to compete with Vince McMahon, then, you know, I guess he could do whatever he wants. He could certainly compete. Vince, I always felt Vince really built it up as more than it was. Like, Ted Turner wanted to compete with me, and it was this blood feud. I don't know. I mean, I never got the impression that Ted Turner was like, we got to put Vince McMahon out of business. You know, this son of a bitch. I always felt like that was Vince's narrative, and it was just built up to be more than it really was. But the biggest reason, just to go back to the original question, and the biggest reason why it would not return the industry to boom times or anything like that, is that he has no television anymore. He doesn't run the Superstation or TNT or any of those channels. He is completely out. And that was the reason why Eric Bischoff's investors pulled out when Bischoff thought he had WCW in his back pocket and he was going to buy him in '01. Once they took the TV slots away from them, it was dead. And the investors pulled out. And Vince swooped in and picked up the whole thing. And picked up, he picked the bones. Because without TV, it was worthless. So unless Ted Turner has television, he's not really doing a whole hell of a lot for TNA or ROH. For TNA, it would keep them alive. So yes, in the case of TNA, it would be meaningful. Because if they had the money then all this talk about going out of business would go away. And they could afford to keep people. And they could afford to actually bring in some big stars and pay people an actual salary instead of paying them per appearance and all that nonsense. So for them, it would be a meaningful change. But Ted Turner coming in has nothing to do with, TNA staying on Spike. Spike is done with TNA. And it's not like Ted Turner has the magic touch and he's going to be able to talk to his network friends and get impact on FX or AMC or TBS. He can't do that. Ring of Honor is already run by a multi-million-dollar media company who, even though they have the resources, apparently doesn't want to allocate those resources to ROH. That's a Sinclair issue. There's nothing Ted Turner can do about that. He could buy Ring of Honor and upgrade their production. That's all great. What about TV? He doesn't have that anymore. So without that, there's not much Turner can do.